Facebook, but we want to make sure that's okay. Sorry about that. Oh, say,
That's okay.
please say that again.
So my biological father was the leader of a satanic cult, and that was when I was just a little girl. And so I was about 5 years old, and he sexually abused myself and my sister. My mom was in a lot of really dangerous situations, and so she couldn't get out. So it wasn't for lack of trying. It was because the entire house was actually covered with recorders at the time. Everything was being filmed. Everywhere we went, we were being followed, and so there was really no way out for a long time. My biological father took my virginity before the age of 5, and a lot of the time, my mom and my sister didn't realize that was happening. In actuality, my sister was also being molested, and she thought by her doing that with him that it was saving me. And I thought that by me, obviously doing what he wanted, I was saving my mother, because there was many times that he had a gun in her mouth and he was threatening to take her life. And so he would say things to me like, if you don't do this, I will kill your mother. So it was a very toxic, very volatile environment. And then additionally, there was drugs everywhere. There was people in the house constantly having sex in my bed, in my bunk bed. And so when I would go to sleep at night, I couldn't go into my room. I'd have to go, back outside into the couch and lay there. And so it was a very volatile environment. And the night before we got out of the environment was he was in the kitchen with a cauldron. And I know that sounds like make-believe. It's very weird and odd. And he was actually making a spell. And his spell was in order to sacrifice my sister and I to the cult. And what that means is it's a sexual sacrifice, and they can do whatever they want to us until, we either pass out or die. And that was the sacrifice that he was preparing for.
And you were at what age that time, at that point?
5 years old. And so my mom had a member of the cult that was able to get her out that morning before he was able to put through the spell or finish it, or obviously allow us to be in that situation. And when we snuck out, the member of the cult was watching over us. So he would have been the one that was following us, right? And so he took us and we went into the center, the center of a busy highway. And it's in Chino. And we couldn't go anywhere, like into the store. We couldn't go anywhere. We had to be in a very public, very, open environment. And my grandparents picked us up, took us to their home, and literally with just a few days before my 6th birthday, we were taken into witness protection, my sister and I. My mom had to earn her rights back as a parent. And the whole process started with going through the court system, and my biological father was eventually incarcerated for 7 years. And I went through 9 different foster homes during that time and separated from my sister. And so it was a very unique experience. Obviously, it was a very traumatic experience. I disassociated a lot with reality. I had blocked out a lot because there were so many different, traumatic events that had happened at that point.
Sure.
But that was the beginning of my life. That was just the beginning, though. I laugh because it's crazy.
I know. And when you shared it with me that night, you shared it in such a way that it was like, okay, so it wasn't meant to be oppressive. It was meant to just enlighten. And I remember just hearing it going, unreal. I've interviewed a lot of different people and a lot of different backgrounds, and this definitely is one of those that I was not expecting when I met you, because when I met you, it was just this great, boisterous, beautiful, wonderful person. And I was like, this is great. And Kyle, and it was just like, everything was great. And I thought, what? wait, backtrack. Let me hear this again. And I remember just being blown away. So that was the beginning.
Yeah.
Where did you go from there?
So,
Well, wait. I got a question for you, because you mentioned, it was really interesting. You mentioned that you knew that your mom uh, wasn't just obliging him and saying, yeah, go ahead, but she just didn't really have any options. Do you think that that helped you forgive your mom at any point?
absolutely. And it's interesting because my mom is my best friend now. Like,
Oh,
she is my best friend. I can't even imagine a bigger hero in my life. She's been through so much. And, she lost her father when she was 16 years old. She was a daddy's girl. And she, kind of went through just a lot of pain in her own life. And then having us exposed to that, just tore her apart. It was not something that she wanted. And it was almost like she was, what I would say is, had a blindfold on. And it wasn't that it was intentional. She was really under, his spell. And that's a very, very dark environment to be in. And it's almost like you're brainwashed through the whole process.
wow.
So we all had to go through a lot of therapy to kind of reverse all of that. Like, in my mind, I thought it was normal what I was doing,
Right.
because I didn't know, at that point as a child, what was not normal.
Yeah. How is your sister today?
So my sister has had, it's interesting. My sister and I have very similar paths in our lives, and our journey kind of really is similar in many ways, but we both responded very, very differently. And so you can see in both of our responses, there's options for looking at us as like, she went one way and I went the other. But the truth is that we both healed in different ways. And we also both have obstacles because of what had happened to us that still impact us today.
Sure. So what was from that moment in your life, that portion, what was the greatest learning, looking back on, that you took from that experience?
Oh, I never looked at I never wanted to be a statistic. I always wanted to prove everyone wrong. And a lot of the things that I believed at that time was, nobody wanted me because I was in so many different foster homes. I didn't understand why this happened to me. And as I got older, I realized that it wasn't about nobody wanted me. It was about, when you're in the witness protection program, they keep moving you when somebody finds you. And so it changed my perspective as I got older, that people did want me. And that's why I was moved to so many different places. And I look back and I look at the life that I was in, and I don't regret it one bit. I look at it as like, this made me completely a much stronger person. You cannot break this woman right here. Okay.
Love it.
And that was just the beginning. So there's so many moments in my life where I'm just like, okay, God, bring it on, baby.
Right. So let's talk about some of those moments. I mean, we'll save the most recent one, but what some of those moments that transpired after that point? Let's talk about some of those.
So I would say, one of the places that I was in was with a family member, and unfortunately, she was going through a lot at the time. She had her own kids, and she took my sister and I in. And that doesn't excuse what happened, but I'm just giving you an outline.
Sure.
And she didn't know how to handle me because I was so out of control at that time. And so she believed in cruel and unusual punishment. And one of the most, I would say, influential moments that was also really devastating for me was, when I say cruel and unusual punishment, I'm going to explain. So bear with me.
Sure.
I was about, 7 or 8. No, I was probably almost 9 by this point. And I'm in the bathroom and I have the shower running, and I decide that I'm going to make mouthwash commercials in the mirror. And I pull my shirt off, and my shirt is like stuck on my head. You know how when you're 9, it's kind of a fun, cute little thing.
Right.
And so that's my hat, and then I'm literally, undressing. So I have my panties around my ankles, but I'm standing there making these little commercials in the mirror with the mouthwash. And she's wondering what's taking so long. And she comes into the bathroom, and I hide the mouthwash behind my back. And I'm obviously standing in front of a giant mirror. So there's that at 9 years old. And she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing." And she asked me to show her the mouthwash bottle. Well, I guess I had basically drank the entire bottle of mouthwash during my episodes of commercials I was filming in my mind. And she was so angry at me that she actually pulled me out of the bathroom and made me stand in front of the bay window facing the street with my shirt on my head and my panties around my ankles. And it was humiliating. And at the same time, my cousin had his friends. They were over and they were moving things in and out of the house, passing that bay window over and over again. And I stood there for 30 minutes with my shirt on my head as a 9-year-old little girl and my panties around my ankles. And that was my consequence for taking too long in the bathroom. So there's a lot of moments like that really, really shaped me in a negative way as I was growing up. It really impacted my self-esteem. And from there, when I was right before my 10th birthday, my mom was able to earn her rights back as a parent. And so I was able to move back in with my mom, which was an amazing opportunity because my mom was my best friend. And even through all of this, I was determined to see my mom again, because a lot of the witness protection, you can't even talk on the phone to your mom. And the problem is that because I had been through so much trauma and through so much, experience by that age, I was rebellious. And so as much as I loved my mom, I was rebellious against everything else. And I ended up leaving on my 16th birthday. And I basically ran away and I lived on the streets. And I enrolled myself into high school. And so
Okay, so let's stop right there because people say they live on the streets, right? And I mean,
yeah.
I lived in a car. I never lived on the streets. I lived in a car for many months after my daughter died. I understand that. But when people say they live on the streets, I don't think people really understand what living on the streets is.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that experience was for you?
So in the beginning, I was able to bounce from house to house from friends' houses until that got really old.
Right.
And then there was nights that I slept in abandoned houses on old mattresses. There was nights that I slept on the park bench across from the school. And remember, I enrolled myself into high school, so I was determined to finish. And so I would wake up and from even sleeping on the park bench at the park across from the school, and I would go into the gym and I would shower and just get ready as if I was a normal kid. I would go to school that day, and then I had 3 jobs. And at the time I would take the bus to each job. And the only way that I was able to actually survive all of that in the fact that I didn't have any food or is because I was also, using drugs at the time. And so that was my survival mechanism. Not that it excuses what I did, but it was definitely the driving force of me being able to stay up all night to get my homework done and to go to school the next day.
What was the most difficult part of that time for you?
Oh, which part was there's
Yeah.
so many parts.
Yeah.
Being on the streets as a 16-year-old girl, you put yourself in a lot of very dangerous situations.
Yeah.
There were many times that I would be in fights with men. I was raped twice when I lived on the streets. One by a 50-year-old man, and I was 16, and another by a 22-year-old man. And so it was a hard time for me because I felt like I blamed myself a lot for putting myself in that situation. And so you don't fight back in some situations because you feel like exposed, you feel like you deserved it because you put yourself there. And so there was a lot of obstacles growing up that I had to learn my worthiness and
Hmm.
my value over time.
How did you ever get to the point where you could trust a man again? However,
Well, I'm still struggling with that one.
I bet. I mean, and I can say rightly so.
Yeah, because now I have other recent situations that
Right.
added to that. So,
So, but I mean, at some point you got married. So at some point you found a way to forgive, understand, and accept a man's love on one level or another.
well, and the biggest
But
thing is
how?
I know that forgiveness is for me. So to be honest, I forgave my biological father for what he did. I forgave the men who hurt me for what they did. And I actually forgave myself, which was a big part that I didn't understand until I was in my 20s.
Amen.
That part of forgiveness of others is also self-forgiveness,
Yeah.
because I blamed myself a lot for putting myself in those situations. And so I had to actually face myself and look at myself in the mirror and envision myself as a little girl. And would I talk to that little girl the way that I talk to myself, and the negative things that I say to myself? Would I say that to that little girl? Never.
Right.
And so I was a single mom at 21. Um, and then I ended up marrying my first husband when I was 23. And I had my daughter at 25. So I was rolling. I was just, trying to climb the corporate ladder. I graduated high school, which was a big deal. And I was really climbing that corporate ladder. But I also was living in a world where I thought that this is what I was supposed to do,
Hmm.
to show and prove to everyone that I was doing it right.
Right.
And I was really unhappy in that marriage. And it was, I was really young and I had a lot of healing to do. And so I left my first husband with my son and my daughter. And that's when I met Kyle.
Hmm. So let's just recap so that people that are watching, raised in a satanic cult that your father was the head of,
Yes.
for 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
molested, everything else, you and your sister.
Yeah.
And then there's an escape because he's planning on sacrificing you and your sister to the community so they can do anything they want to you.
Correct.
And you escape. You are taken away from your mom because of the situation. And then you're living from foster home to foster home. And, and then you end up leaving and going on the streets and living in
Yes.
abandoned houses and everything else.
I just had to make it
Uh,
worse.
right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, we jump from the frying pan to the fire, but I get it. And yet I get it on some level. And I never want to say that I totally understand. I get it on some level. And then now you enroll yourself in high school, you're living on the streets, you're living in a park bench, wherever you can. And and then you fast forward, you get married and you have a couple of kids, and then you end up leaving that marriage. And then what?
Well, then I fell in love with Kyle. And Kyle was like he was very charismatic. He was very like deep and really pulled out a lot of the things that I needed to work on and healing, and taught me that sex is not love and sex is not affection. And he taught me a lot about myself and my body and learning to love myself.
Mm.
But also definitely made a lot of mistakes. And so we were together for 2 years before we got married. And then 2 weeks after we get back from our honeymoon, a woman walks into my office. I was a VP of marketing at the time and at a large corporation in Temecula. And I was in the executive suite, and I look over and I see this woman walk in, and the executive suite at this point is empty because they're all out to lunch. I'm still working through my lunch, especially as a 29-year-old VP, working all night long.
Yeah.
But the moment I looked at her, I knew something was wrong. And she came into my office and she sat down and she described my home. She described my children to me. And she sent me 300 messages with videos and pictures and everything, that her and my husband had been together for a year prior to us getting married. And that because we got back from the honeymoon and she was angry that he didn't choose her,
Wow.
she wanted to let me know what was going on. So that was the first time that I found out my husband was cheating. And it became a downward spiral. We confronted him together that day. I was in, I kind of shifted into nurturing mode for her because she was just crying in my office and I was in shock. So I couldn't even absorb the fact that this was happening to me. I was thinking it was happening to her in that moment. And we went and we confronted him about his unfaithfulness. And the moment that he walks out and sees the two of us standing next to each other, she grabs my hand. Now, remember, I've never met this woman in my life. And it was it was a very dramatic moment. My husband falls to his knees and, starts yelling at her, saying that he doesn't love her, that he loves me. And from that point on, it was just chaos. He starts to get suicidal. I'm trying to continue working, and he calls me in the middle of the day, and he had been drinking, and then also took some pills.
So wait, you go from this confrontation in your office to go back to work.
Well, yeah, I had to go back to work, and I was a VP of marketing. I couldn't not work, and so I didn't want to go home and deal with that.
Right.
I literally was just like, and at this point, I hadn't told anybody because I was super ashamed of what had just happened. I literally just got back from my honeymoon, and we had a blended family together. His son at this point is only 2 years old. My daughter was like 4 or 5. My son was like 8. So I was really in like holy shit mode. I was like,
but I mean, you've got this all dumped on you, all these pictures, all these things, and yet you have empathy for this woman that you've never met.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, where do you think that came from for your ability to have empathy for her?
I think it comes from being human. Like, I think that because I've made so many mistakes in my life.
Wait, I know a lot of humans that aren't empathetic to anyone, much less somebody to the mistress.
No, but like, think about like all of the things I faced in my life to this point.
So you mean all of those things built you up to that point where you could be empathetic?
Like I was very, very empathetic, and I'm very sensitive towards other people's feelings. And I put myself in their situation and understanding that it's not always about me, to be honest. And most people would think it's all about me in that moment.
Right.
But it wasn't. It was about what had happened in that moment. Was this woman was broken and came into my office after being with my husband for a year thinking that she was the one. And so in her mind, she didn't think she was stealing my husband. She thought that, in her mind, she was the woman, even though she knew of me. Right? Like, so there is a lot of psychological, messages that are going through my mind at the time, like, oh my gosh, who is this woman? But I wasn't angry at her at that moment. I wasn't really even angry with my husband. I was just hurt. Now I became angry, obviously, because that's a part of the process. But yeah, I had to keep going.
So you just keep going back to work. You just keep going, and then when you get home, what was that like?
Oh, well, that was fun. How do you not expose all of this when you have kids? How do you not just tell everything just falls apart in that moment, right? So I was really trying to hold it together. And a lot of my life, I've had to really push through some tough things.
Sure.
And so I think it really gave me a different perspective and a much more, different cadence and traction, that when I had hard things to deal with, I dealt with them a lot differently than most people would at that moment. And so days go on, and then he calls me drunk in the middle of the workday, and I'm trying to keep myself together. I can't lose my job. I'm a VP of marketing. I mean, like, it's a big deal.
Wait, did you think about leaving at that point?
No.
Still not even a thought of leaving?
No, my thought was, why didn't she tell me 2 weeks ago?
I can get that one.
Right? Like, I was like, darn it. Yeah. If you would have just told me 2 weeks earlier, I could have been on my own.
Wow.
But at this point, I couldn't do that to my kids. Like, this was a big deal, you know, like, you just brought together an entire blended family. Yeah. Your kids love each other. They're little, they're working together. My parents just moved in with us at that time. Like, it was a lot of going on. There was no way I was going to give up.
Wait. Your parents just moved in with you at that point?
Yes.
What did mom and dad have to say? Or were they completely blindsided?
They were blindsided because I didn't tell them at first what happened until I got home and he was passed out. And I saw the vodka, I saw the pills, and he wouldn't wake up.
Wow.
And at this point, I'm panicking. I don't know what to do. And I called the police because, like, I didn't know if he needed an ambulance. I didn't know at that point. Well, when the police arrive, he gets up and he runs. He runs from the police. I don't know what was going on in his mind, but he ran and he just disappeared. And so the police leave. I'm in shock, trying to figure out where my husband just went. And I know that at this point he's suicidal. Like, I know that he's really struggling because he's blaming himself. He's internalizing it. So I go into nurturing mode instead of me going through my own healing process at that time. I'm now trying to take care of this other woman and my husband. I literally was just like, and I also am trying to take care of my kids. And I'm also trying to take care, you know, like, of all of the moving pieces in my life. And I don't realize the police are watching the house. And so when he comes home that night, the police came and they took him for a 5150. And that night he stayed in the hospital for the 5150, and I had to pick him up the next morning. That was the longest drive I think I've ever had in my whole life.
What was going through your mind as you're going to pick him up? Is it like, what am I doing? What am I thinking?
No, it was more like,
oh, I just can't wait to get him back.
He's gonna kill me.
Wow, okay, so there was a fear of that. Okay.
Like, in my head, I'm just like, he's gonna be so angry at me. Like, I know he'd never hurt me, but I knew that he would be angry. And he gets in the car and he is furious with me. And of course he is. He just had to spend the night in a mental hospital. Like, right, of course he's furious. And I said, the one thing that we need to do in order to make this work, because remember, now this is only a few weeks in after we just got married, is I said that we need to go and we're going to do a 4-day marriage boot camp. And we're going to find the best one out there, and we're going to get through this, because I'm not going to let this ruin our marriage.
Wow. And
so we did. And it actually empowered us. It made us a lot stronger at that time. It was an amazing experience for us. It was very, very intense, like, you know, emotional training and working through our own issues in order to be better for each other. Had a lot of, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy involved and exercises. Good. So it was intense and amazing. And that was kind of shifted the first part of our marriage.
So that's great that it changed some things for a period of time, right? Total immersion can do that, but spaced repetition is where the real change goes on forever. Yeah. So what happened? Because that was the first time he cheated, but wasn't the last, correct?
Correct. So at that point, I was in desperation mode, feeling like I wasn't enough, that, you know, a lot of the things that he said as to why he cheated was because I was working too much. I wasn't giving him enough affection. I was giving him sex, but I wasn't giving him enough affection. And so I didn't understand the difference at that point. I was still learning it. And so I thought that if I opened up our marriage to other couples, or like if we had a more open marriage, that he would do things with me and not behind my back. So we did have a stage in our marriage where I really did believe that if we're doing it together, he's not going to do it without me. And that was highly damaging to our marriage, because it was not something that you would ever really want to do in your marriage. You don't want to bring other people into your marriage. It's not healthy at all. But in my mind at that moment, I really was just trying to find a way to keep my husband and keep him open and honest about, being with other people instead of doing it without me. Yeah. But I couldn't do that for long, because I actually, the IT person at my job saw me looking at an email on my computer. It was a personal email, like through my, Gmail account. And he printed that email and put it in front of the president of the company. And so that day I had a presentation in front of all of the executives, and I was super pumped and excited about my presentation, not knowing what this IT director had done. I finished the presentation, and my boss, who's the president of the company, asked me to sit down and asks everyone to leave. And he confronts me about the email that I had sent about this lifestyle to my husband. And he asked me to take a severance and to sign off on documentation that I wouldn't sue, but that I would gracefully leave the company, because he didn't want my personal life to represent their company. And I lost my job that day. Wow. Most devastating moment of my life, considering I've lived on the streets. I got myself through high school. I climbed the corporate ladder. I only had a little bit of college under my belt. And to be 29, at that point, I'd owned 2 houses, and I was a VP of marketing, and I felt like I lost everything. I just lost
identity, everything, right?
Everything.
Yeah.
Like, I think that devastated me more than this woman walking in my office, because it was like 29 years of like blood, sweat, and tears. And then I just lost it all. And so, you never know that in the moments of suffering, there's joy. And you have to find that joy, because you never know what that suffering is about until later. And my mother was now a part of all this. And my mom and my stepdad were living with us. And my stepdad is also my hero. He's been in my life since I was 12 and love him.
Oh, that's awesome.
He's amazing. But my mom looks at me and says, well, why don't you start your own business? And I was like, I literally was like, oh, you're funny. Oh, you're so funny. I like getting a paycheck. And she said, if you could work even like a quarter of the spirit and the drive that you have in your own business for yourself, even a quarter of what you give to everyone else, she's like, you'd be incredible. And so I said,
I got chills.
Yeah. And I said, Mom, no, and she's like, well, if you're not going to do it for you, then do it for me. And I was like, oh, that's so manipulative. I was like,
whatever.
I was like, okay. And so my mom actually named the company Pulse Marketing. That's who named the company.
I love it.
And at the time I was, I literally thought it was a joke. I was still putting my resume out. I didn't think that my company would actually grow into what it is today.
Yeah.
And it really resonated with me that I wasn't just doing this for myself. I was doing it for my mom, to prove everyone in my life that I was a fighter and I was going to make it through. And so my husband, at that point, we were in a healthy place after we got through all those obstacles in the beginning of our marriage.
Sure.
And he left his job and came and worked with me in the business. So we were, inseparable. We were the power couple. We were, building this business together. It was incredible. And then about 3 years ago, we go to a trade show in Las Vegas. And I typically didn't go to shows because he was in sales and I was behind the scenes. And this particular one, I just gone with him to kind of get away. And during the day we went and we were by the pool. And so he was in the pool and I was laying out and I heard his phone go off. And so I looked down to go hand it to him. And it says, "I thought you were going to leave her for us to be together." Now, this is a whole different woman at this point. And I think I just blacked out at that moment because I was just like, not again. Like
Right.
by this point, it's several years within our marriage. Now we have a business. Now we had, our children are older. It just blindsided me because I thought we got through that. I thought we really worked through a lot of these issues in the beginning of our marriage. And I didn't tell anyone about that woman. In fact, that night he got drunk. He was telling me he was going to, kill himself. He's going to take his life, that he couldn't imagine losing me. He sent me photos of himself cutting himself, because he'd left the hotel that night. I was just beside myself, completely distraught and worried. But I mean, I didn't have a vehicle because he took the car that we had driven there. And finally he comes back and he literally is just in tears and sobbing. And remember, I'm still in shock because it just brought back all the trauma from the first one.
Of course.
And all of the healing had literally just been erased, it felt like. And I just had to start over on this healing process, but I didn't want to. And so I went into a really, really dark depression for a year. I relapsed. By that point, I had not done any drugs, since I was living on the streets. And that was like 15 to 18 years sober.
Wow.
And I relapsed. I started drinking every night. I didn't tell anyone. And so I would go to work every day and pretend like everything was fine. I would tuck my kids into bed. My parents were living with me. My dad just had open heart surgery at that point, my stepdad. And so my parents had a lot going on. We just moved into a new house. It was so much. And I just acted like the day was the day, worked through it, smiled. And then the moment I went into my room at night, I went into the closet, closed the door, and cried. And I drank every night for a year, just depressed. I couldn't get through it.
Yeah.
I mean, we had done counseling over and over again, and my counselor was incredible, but I just could not get out of that darkness.
What were the questions? I believe that the quality of our connection with ourselves or anyone else is determined by the quality of questions we ask. What were the questions you were asking yourself during that time?
At that time, I thought, like, why am I not enough? Why am I not good enough? Why can't I just keep him happy? Like, what have I done? Because it wasn't a sexual thing. It was very much an emotional, connection that he wanted that I wasn't able to see or give in the way he needed it. And I had to learn and realize over time that actually wasn't my job. Like when he had a void, that he needed to fill that void. And it wasn't my job to fill it. And so I was an overachiever at everything. I was an overachiever at being his wife. I was an overachiever in every aspect of life. And I felt like, why can't I just, like, what am I not doing wrong? I mean, like, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I just earn his love? And my counselor told me one time, he said, because you can't earn love. It's a choice. And I was like, no, but I'm amazing. I am awesome. I was like, I am incredible. I own a company. I'm a mom of 3 and a blended family. Wow. I mean, like, I got all this stuff going on and we are moving forward. I am a good wife. Like, I take care of him, his needs. And it's just one piece of him that always said that he had this void or that I couldn't fill it. And so I started to really believe I wasn't enough until eventually I realized that I am enough and that it's not my responsibility to fill his void.
Now, I've known you 2 years, just over 2 years. Flo Mina, who's on, it was there as well. And I've known you for 2 years. So this was 3 years ago, you said, about. So yeah. This was like just 1 year after I met you. I met you 1 year after that. Wow. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Man.
was pretty
Amazing.
vibrant.
Yeah. I mean, and I can hear
I was
the
still going. I was like, I'm still healing. I'm healing.
And I think one of the interesting parts about that is that out of all the things you knew, I was a good wife, I was a good this, business owner, all this. There had to have been that other part of you saying, and look what I've already overcome. I mean, I've dealt with this from my childhood. I've dealt with this, and I look where I'm at. So you almost have validating proof that you can handle it,
yes,
no matter what it is.
I'm just like, throw it at me.
But then what?
But then it got worse. So after I've started the healing process from that woman, it did take me a year, but I then started really healing and really finding myself and identifying the core of who I was. But he was really angry at that point because I started to have a lot of health issues. So much so that at one point in April of last year, I had a miscarriage. And I thought that I couldn't get pregnant. I didn't know. And so I was having a ton of health issues and realized that I just had a miscarriage. And that in itself was one of the most devastating experiences for any woman to go through. I remember at the day that happened, one of my employees was sitting right in front of me. And all I felt in that moment was that I literally was sitting in a puddle of blood. And I didn't want to upset my employee because I knew that she would get really like, high strung or upset. And so I gracefully stood up. I pushed in my chair so she couldn't see what had happened. And I kind of escorted her out. And then I just walked with my back to the door. And then I went to the bathroom and I had this miscarriage and I had to go to the hospital that day. And Kyle didn't show up. And he didn't come to the hospital that day. And I remember that there was so much going on because we were still, like, he had a lot of anger built up from the fact that I had gone through a huge depression, the fact that my body was breaking down because of just the amount of stress that I had put on myself. Sure. And that even though I was starting my healing process at that time, he was in a completely different path now. And at this point, we were together for 9 years, so like we had been through a lot, but I'd never seen this side of him. And it was a really angry side. And so a few months after that had happened,
Did he ever show up at the hospital?
No.
Never showed up?
No.
Silent, radio silence.
Yeah, when I got home, I think it was more disbelief of what happened. I think that we really thought that I couldn't get pregnant. And so the fact that it happened and then I had a miscarriage, that it was almost like it wasn't real to him. And so I had to go through now this mourning process of mourning this part of me that I was 3 months pregnant at the time. And so, it was really hard on my body. And I didn't, I'd never known what to experience. No one gives you any type of outline of what's going to happen when you have a miscarriage. So it was a very traumatic experience for my body to go through that, because I had no idea what to expect, and I'd had children before. And so the amount of blood that I lost was, it was a lot. I had to sit on a beach towel basically on the way to the hospital because it was losing so much blood. So it was a rough day.
Yeah.
So fast forward, that was in April. And then in October, he went on a hunting trip. And I remember at this point, our sales were down for 4 months and we were really struggling in our business. And he was responsible for sales, so it was a big deal.
Right.
And he said, I told him, I said, I can't make the mortgage this month. Like I haven't gotten paid in a few months because I've been paying our staff, but I haven't gotten paid because we just didn't have the cash flow in order to cover my paycheck or his. And this is the first time I ever told him that I couldn't pay him. And even though like he wanted to go on this hunting trip and he was adamant at going on this hunting trip, he said, well, we'll just sell the house. And I was like, what? Like, so I knew at that point, I knew something was wrong. I knew that it was bigger than going on a hunting trip. Right. Well, he ended up going on the hunting trip, and right before he had left for the hunting trip, he wanted to start his own business. And so he wanted to leave Pulse Marketing and start his own business. And so I thought that while he was gone, I would set up his computer so that when he got back, everything would be ready. And I opened his computer to start transferring over the files and get it all set up for his new business. And his iMessage was connected to his iPhone. And all these images of a different woman, a third woman, started coming up. He was writing her name in the snow, carving their initials with a heart in the tree, and saying that when he got back that he was ready to leave me. And so what was odd is right before finding that, the night before I had a session with my counselor, and I said, I think it's time. I knew something was wrong. And he goes, time for what? And I said, I think it's time for me to leave. I think I need to get a divorce. He said, what are you afraid of? And I said, I'm afraid of my parents not having a place to go. I'm afraid of tearing my family apart. I'm afraid of losing my business. And I'm afraid that he's going to hurt himself. Like that, there's been too many times where I've seen him in these really dark moments, and I'm afraid that he'll do something. Right. And so my counselor worked through what those different fears were, and we worked through them. The next day, when I found these messages from this woman, I didn't confront him about it. I just hired a divorce attorney, called a real estate agent to list the house, told my parents, which my parents, remember, nobody knew about the second woman, let alone a third woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the only one they knew about was, 8 years prior. And so it was like a whole whirlwind of emotions. And then my son, I had to tell my children, and I had to tell my staff. So I go in to tell my staff, and I'm trying to be strong. I'm trying to be empowered. And I let them know that we're going to be stronger next year. 2020 is going to be amazing. We're going to rock it. Like, don't worry. This is just like we'll get through this together.
And when you say tell your children, you're also talking about, this is a blended family of 8 years. You're telling your children and his children from previous relationship.
So I did not tell his child. That's the one thing I didn't do, because I didn't feel like it was my place as much as I was his mom. I told mine.
Okay.
And so I tell my staff, and then we end the meeting, and they're bantering back and forth. And I say, you guys, let's not gossip. It's already been enough. We've had enough to deal with. Let's not make this a big deal. And my son, who also works for the company, he's 18 years old. He walks in and he says, Mom, they're not gossiping. And I was like, what? And he goes, the employee that was sitting in front of you when you had the miscarriage, he's been with that employee. And he was with several other people. And I was like, you mean the one employee that just left the company what? And everyone in the company except for 2 people knew that they were seeing each other except for me. And my son said, I just didn't want to see you hurt, Mom. I didn't know how to tell you. And that just crushed me. And then it's still not over.
Yeah.
Then it still gets worse. So I pack up all my stuff. I leave before he even gets home. And we separate. When he gets back, the house is in order. We listed the house for sale. He moved into Canyon Lake. I moved just like literally in Wildemar, just down the street. And then when I left in October, I was healing, and I was starting to feel like this blindfold came off, and I was vibrant. I had to really separate myself from him because I couldn't watch this downward spiral that he was, going in.
Sure.
He started seeing multiple women and, just kind of living, this crazy lifestyle. And on March 27th, I get a call, several calls. I get a message from him in the middle of the night that says, "I'm so sorry for ever hurting you. And I'm so thankful for all the memories that we shared." And in my heart, remember, I don't know anything about it, what's going on in his life. I felt like that was a good message. Like he finally acknowledged that he did something wrong, and he's saying, "I'm sorry." Like maybe he hit rock bottom and he's going to be changing now. But little did I know that that was the last message I would ever receive from him. And I had gotten several calls that morning from a woman that he was seeing at the time. And I called her back, and I couldn't understand her. She was completely just losing her mind, and I couldn't understand what she was saying. And I just said, "Can you text me what you're saying? I don't know what's wrong." I've never met her either, so I didn't know who she, I just knew of her.
Right.
And she texted me the information to the hospital next door to my condo. And in that moment, I knew like something is terribly wrong. And I didn't follow him on Facebook, so I didn't see his posts. But later on, I found out what really happened. And I run down the stairs. My oldest son is there. My daughter's there. I told her, "Stay home." And my oldest son and I run to the hospital. Literally, it took us 3 minutes to get there because that's how close it is. I'm in a state of mind where I'm like, we're still married. We had not finalized the divorce. And as much as he has hurt me, I still love a man, like the man that I was with for 10 years. We've been through a lot. We had a lot of good times as well. And so in my heart, I was just confused as to what was happening. And I get to the hospital. COVID-19 had just hit, so the hospital was empty. And it felt very, very sterile and weird. And they had us waiting there for quite some time. And I'm confused, and they put us in this dark room. And it's like a small, literally like 5x5 waiting room. And I look at my son and I said, "My dad has open heart surgery here, but I've never been in a room like this." And my son's like, "Just be positive, Mom. Like, just be positive." And so I was like, okay. And a detective walks in and 2 nurses, and they said that he took his life and that he was pronounced dead at the hospital when he arrived. And my son and I looked at each other and just in shock. Why didn't he reach out? Like, why didn't he tell us he needed help? He knew that we were like, it wasn't like so angry to where he couldn't talk to us. My son just saw him the Sunday before, and they had the best day fishing and an amazing day. And he thought, he had broken up with this woman that he was having problems with at the time. And my son was really proud of how far he'd come, and he had a new job. But my son went to the bathroom and saw a handgun in the bathroom and didn't know what to say. And so then my son realized that that was the handgun he used the night that he took his life. And the night that he took his life, he sent me that message at 3 a.m. He had the woman that he was seeing, he had her over, and she fell asleep, and he was looking through her phone, saw that she was with other men, got really upset, started to spiral out of control. Drinking was involved, so he wasn't in his right mindset. And when she woke up, they started arguing. She called the police. She had her 4-year-old daughter with her at the time. The police arrived at the house. Her and her daughter went outside to talk to the police. The officer came into the home, and the moment the officer stepped into the home, my husband shot himself in the head in front of the police officer. And on his mirror in his room, he wrote, "I am enough." And so the whole time in our marriage, when I thought I wasn't enough, it was because he thought that he wasn't enough.
Wow.
So it's been a journey.
Serena, I knew you had strength. I knew you had courage. I knew you had passion, empathy, all of that. But to this degree, I had no idea. And I just want to, before we open up for questions, I just want to tell you one, as a man, I apologize for everything that any men have ever done to you on their behalf, because they're not here to say it and they probably wouldn't, but I am. And so I just hope you'll receive it as from them on their behalf. I just want to apologize and tell you how much you are so more than enough and so valued and appreciated and respected for how you've handled things. And I just want to tell you I love you and I appreciate you. And I'm grateful for the impact that you're going to have in this world. And I know that this story is not done. And I know that this story has an amazing ending. And that this product, the ending is going to be a byproduct of all of the things that you've been through as what I call price paid. So thank you for being willing to pay that price.
Thank you for allowing me to share my story.
Absolutely. So I'm going to open it up, guys. You know, we only have a few minutes left, but if anyone has a question, go ahead and raise your hand. We'll be more than happy to just be respectful of the question and be respectful of the time. But if you have a question, go ahead and ask it. Raise your hand. Okay, there we go. Oh, well, Cindy just gave a thumbs up. Cindy, I'm not sure if that's, I want to ask her a question or just thank you. Yes. Okay, let's go with Donna. Go ahead and bring yourself on.
Hi, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, my heart is like breaking. This has been an incredible conversation. And the question that I have for you is, when you said that you realized that you were not good or you felt like you were not good enough, but that it wasn't your fault to fill his void. Like, how did you come to the realization of that? Like that it seemed like a pivot point for you. So I was just wondering, like, what process did you work through to realize that?
Well, I've done a lot of counseling, obviously. I wouldn't be so healthy if I didn't. But one of the things that I always struggled with was earning affection, earning love, earning all of this. And when I realized through some of the counseling sessions that it's not my responsibility to fill somebody's void, it's their responsibility. And it's also not my responsibility to earn love. It should be freely given.
Amen.
And so that is a part of my healing process that I've learned over time through many different counseling sessions. I don't think I would have survived without those counselors, you guys, honestly.
Wow. Yeah, and so many women live that story of not good enough. That's why I ask, because it's so prevalent in women who've been through nothing like what you've been through. Right. And yet still they carry this I'm not good enough thing. So
you have to start to look within yourself to identify what makes you good. And love those parts about you, and also love the parts about you that aren't so good, so that you can start to work through them. Once you acknowledge those moments and things about yourself, that's how you work through it.
Yeah. Wow. Incredibly strong. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your story. It's really, really, really amazing.
Cindy, I think I saw you had a question, so go ahead and hop on. There you are.
Yes. I had a question. When she was in the closet drinking and all that stuff, what was the thing that finally clicked that you could do this and that you were strong enough to do it? Are you okay now?
Oh, yes. You know, I learned one thing throughout my life is when I was a little girl, I would also hide in the closet after I was molested. And so fast forwarding to doing that same thing as an adult, it clicked in my mind that you cannot heal when you hide.
Right.
And when you hide behind your Facebook feed, when you hide behind this, fake smile or perfect life, when you hide literally in the closet, you cannot heal when you hide. And so I think that was a pivoting point for me in order to realize that I needed to share my story in order to heal.
Yeah. Love that.
And thank you for that too. That's
Yeah.
a powerful, powerful story a lot of us can use.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the next level pillars that I talk about a lot is avoidance is not the same as resolution.
Yes.
And but I love the way you said that. Could you say that again? You cannot.
You cannot heal when you hide.
Love it.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautifully
Beautiful.
said.
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Flo, I see you have a question. Go ahead and come on. There's Flo.
Hi, Serena. Thank you for sharing. Oh my gosh, just so many things that you had touched on. I love your self-love, that you realize that you have to love yourself, and even forgiving yourself. So what's next for Serena? What's next for you?
So after all these years, I've had mentors and counselors, my mom, everyone has told me I need to write a book. And I've decided to start writing a book so that I can help others that are struggling through many of the different same experiences that I've been through. And then I'm also really nervous about this, but I know that if it doesn't scare you, then it's not challenging enough. So, but my next step is hopefully that I can be a speaker and share my story with women and people all over the world that can learn and heal from it.
Awesome. And just one little quote that just came to mind when you were saying that. My advice is, or just not even advice, just it just came to mind that when you get nervous, focus on service.
Oh,
That
I
was
love
just
that. I love that.
When you were saying you get nervous about, your book and speaking and everything, that just came to mind. So
Thank
you.
Awesome.
Good seeing you again.
Thank you.
So, Serena, as we wrap this up, I'm glad that Flo asked what's next. One, as a speaker and been doing it for many years, as an author, anything I can bring to value, just let me know. I'll be more than happy to make resources, sit down, discuss anything. I know you have some great mentors, so I'm not replacing that. I'm just adding to.
I need all the help I can get.
but I would love to help you get some more platforms and speak. Your message is so valuable, and any one part of it is extremely valuable, and the combined is undoubtedly. So let me know how I can do that. I'm going to add you to the Facebook group of Next Level by Association. Wonderful. And I'm going to give you access to the Conversation That Matters Facebook group as well, because I think both of those will give you some greater insights and some greater interaction with some people that will need to hear your story, and that I think can maybe benefit from you, but also maybe be a resource and a benefit to you. So both of those will be adding. So just look for the invitation. You can and then just accept if you choose to. And so do you have a website? I mean, I've seen some of your posts recently. It was really cool. Some of your interactions and some of your posts. What's the messaging that you want to give out right now?
Well, I have a website for our marketing agency, but not for me.
Okay.
And so I'm really working on trying to identify like my next steps, of course.
Okay.
But in that, I would say the biggest thing I want to share is really like, don't hide behind, all of these things that you're afraid. I mean, I was hiding behind my husband because I didn't want to ruin his integrity. I was hiding behind my kids because I didn't want them to know that this was happening. And at the end of all of this, so much loss and so many obstacles, I would say you have to remember that forgiveness doesn't mean tolerance.
Amen.
And so moving past that and understanding that you deserve and you are worthy of more.
Amen.
So that would be my message.
Wow. Well said. Well said. Serena, I've said it before. I love you. I am so appreciative of your impact in this world, and I'm grateful for you hopping on and sharing your story with us. We will have more of these interactions, and the conversation that matters is a whole nother platform that we're doing. We just did a Black Lives Matter this last week, 2-hour with panel of people, amazing people. We're going to do some on drug addiction. We're going to do some on suicide. We're going to do some on human trafficking. It's going to be.
I can get most of those.
I'm just going to say, it's like, okay, should we just have her as a repeat? And seriously, I may ask you to be, because I think the occult is another thing that whether we want to classify something as an occult or not, if we just look and see what it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of darkness out there.
A lot of darkness. So we'll be doing a lot of these conversations under the banner of The Conversation Matters, and that website's being set up and everything. So we'll have you back on that. But I want you to be a part of both groups if you choose to be. I'd love to have you at the Next Level by Association and The Conversation Matters. And when I come back to California, I want to sit down and have coffee with you and give you a hug.
I'd love that.
All right.
Thank
All right.
you
Well,
so much.
thank you. And folks, thanks for asking questions. When you go into the Facebook group, people will be able to interact with you and ask you questions and stuff like that. And we have a great community of people that will just love on you. So
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story, and I will join those groups.
absolutely. All right, guys, get out there, make it a great week, and just love on Serena and love on each other. Enjoy your next level.